So this is it then, the definitive list as voted by our ESPN colleagues regarding the top 5 entries into the Premier League Hall of Fame. Here it is in all their glory. Thierry Henry, Alan Shearer, Giggs, Scholes and Gerrard. Stevie Nicol and Ian Darke with me. Boys, do you agree with this top 5? Ian, let's start with you.
I agree with. I think on my list, I had 4 of that 5 in my top 5. But I had Shearer a bit lower than 2, and I had Roy Keane at number 2 because I think he was the driving force and inspiration and the complete midfield player for Manchester United for so long. So I'd have had him in the top 5.
What about you, Stephen Nicol?
I would have made one change. I would have put Cantona in there instead of Scholes, and I would have put him ahead of Henry. I would have had Shearer at 1 and then Cantona. I don't think you can think of the Premier League without thinking of Eric Cantona. I mean, four titles in 5 years. You talk about bringing a Gallic flair to the Premier League. I mean, no question. Right at the very beginning of the Premier League, I mean, he absolutely, in my opinion, pulled in millions from outside the UK.
Let's take a look at the rest of the top 10 then and get your opinions on that. Keane, who I know, Ian, you said should be higher. Lampard then in at 7. Vieira at 9. Bergkamp at 10. Cantona in at 8. Ian,
well, I think if you were doing a top 5 or even a top 3 of charismatic players, Cantona would be very, very high indeed, because he really did have an aura about him, an electricity, and you wondered what was going to happen next, good or bad. It was usually good, and of course, famously, infamously, it was bad a couple of times as well. I'll tell you something interesting about the list. There's not a single defender on it. So defenders, I had John Terry in my top 10. I know a lot of people would have had Rio Ferdinand in their top 10 as well. Some people might have even had Tony Adams. So is there some kind of bias, I wonder, against defenders? Stevie Nicol, I'm sure will have a view on that.
Well, you know what, and probably in a couple of years just before the Premier League itself kicked off, there really was a movement towards, you know, basically not kicking your opponent. You know, challenges were frowned upon all of a sudden. Any sort of physical contact or trying to use any physical way of upsetting your opponents sort of started coming into play around the 90s, and of course the Premier League, it's just carried on. In fact, you know, to the point now where you just can't go near anybody, and so it's very difficult for everybody to actually turn around and pull a defender out and say he's the best player in the league or the top 5, because it's all about scoring goals. It's all about attacking. So, listen, defending seems to have gone out the window. The basics of defending have disappeared, and when anybody's actually any good, they do stick out. Van Dijk is a great player, but he sticks out even more because there are so few defenders around today, and it's just a case of, you know, that's not the focus anymore. The focus is on going forward and all your tricks and flicks and diving around and all these things. Defending's way down the bottom of the list when it comes to what people are actually looking for when they watch the Premier League in particular.
Who would you have had in this top 10, Stevie, who's not there?
I'm not so sure the top 10's wrong, to be honest with you.
Really?
I'm struggling to come up with anybody who I would put ahead of what's actually there. Yeah, I absolutely think, you know, Ian was saying earlier about no goalkeepers. You'd have to look at Schmeichel. Absolutely, you'd have to look at Schmeichel. I think Schmeichel was the best goalkeeper so far in Premier League history. And if you're that good, surely you have to be in a top 10 of players in the Premier League. So I'm not sure who I would kick out. I would maybe swap him for Scholes, to be honest. I think I would have Schmeichel in as a more important cog than Scholes, as fantastic as Scholes was.
Last one on this then, Ian. Who else would you have in this top 10? You mentioned John Terry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was the only one that differed. I didn't have Vieira in my top 10, and I'm not in any way pouring any cold water on how brilliant a player he was as a box-to-box midfielder and leader for Arsenal. And everybody was kind of saying when he was signed by Arsene Wenger, well, who is he really? He hadn't really done much. What a player he was. But he didn't make the top 10. But, I mean, this is some kind of sweet trolley, isn't it, of fantastic footballers, and a lot of them are not in there. Rio Ferdinand's not in that list. Rooney's not in that list as well. I mean, Bergkamp's down at 10. You talk to a lot of ex-pros or current pros, and they'd say they wouldn't dream of having any Premier League Select 11 without him in it. They thought he was that good. But, hey, look, opinions make the world go round.
No Cristiano Ronaldo either. There we go then,
Yeah.
boys. Thank you very
Suarez.
much to Ian Darke. Oh, indeed. Thank you very much, or Craig Burley. Thank you very much then to Ian and to Stevie.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.